Just before we welcome the fellow speakers, it's just great to see everybody coming in. I'm seeing the numbers are still coming through. We've obviously got a whole number of students and faculty joining us from all around the world for today's show. But let's introduce fellow panelists that you've already seen, but for those of you that are joining us, Perry, why don't you say hello?
Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you might be in the world. My name is Professor Perry Hobson. I'm based here in Malaysia at Sunway University. So once again, thank you for those joining us for the first time, or welcome back if you've been on with us in 30-minute talks before.
And I'm Dr. Andy Nazarechuk. I'm here from the Philippines and looking forward to today's session because it's a destination I've been to many times and looking forward to getting an update about it.
Thank you. And as you know, everybody, I'm from Australia. Welcome. And as we said, thank you very much for joining us again. And as always, we need to thank our academic partners because, as you know, without them, we would have no show. So I'll run through a couple and I'll ask Perry to run through a few. The Lyceum of the Philippines University, one of our original sponsors, or our original sponsor, thank you very much. University of Santo Tomas, thank you very much. National Kaohsiung University of Hospitality and Tourism and the Master's Program, our guest speaker from last week joined us from there. Thank you very much for their sponsorship. Perry?
And also to my colleagues at Sunway University, to our friends at Macau, in the Macau Association of Hospitality and Tourism Educators, to the Higher Education Leadership Institute in Australia, and a very warm welcome to our friends from Hawaii, who we're about to introduce in a moment, from the School of Travel Industry Management.
Thank you, and that's the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And thank you very much to our new sponsors from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the Shidler College of Business. And ladies and gentlemen, as you know, a really popular segment that's proven to become more and more popular over the weeks, started by Dr. Andy and hosting today's 90 Seconds.
Welcome to 90 Seconds. I'm Dr. Andy Nazarechuk, and today we will be discussing webinars. Yes, webinars are everywhere, and it is important for you to decide where you will be investing your time. I don't know about you, but it sure seems like we are busier now than before the pandemic. Every day, I'm receiving invitations to more and more webinars. Therefore, I have to make a decision of which webinars I want to attend. Of course, I hope that you will decide to attend our 30-minute talks every week, but that decision is up to you. We are all attending various Zoom meetings, but you can always tell that some people are truly interested in the discussion. Others are just wasting their time. With so many decisions to make, I wanted to give you two pieces of advice. First, be curious. It is good to attend different webinars with different topics. You may learn something new. As shown in this photo, if you don't try a new drink, you'll never know if you like it. It is important that you ask questions. Be an active participant. Don't dismiss information. Evaluate it to see if there's something you can learn that you didn't know before. Understand the issues that everyone is talking about. Those issues will affect your future. The second point is to be focused. Become a master of your specialty and share what you know. Create networks amongst your friends, and they will respect your subject knowledge. Finally, while it is good to be curious, you must be focused, or you'll be lost in a sea of information. If you take advantage of online learning, you can become the expert that others will seek to learn from. Thank you for listening, and that concludes today's 90 Seconds.
And once again, Dr. Andy, thank you very much for another very interesting 90 seconds. And I can't agree anymore. I mean, we used to all be spammed with emails some time ago. Now it seems like in the email, every second email I read is another invitation to another webinar or another online meeting. So very, very topical subject. And ladies and gentlemen, just before I introduce our guest speaker for today, let's get everybody in the mood. Well, there we go. What a piece of music that I'm sure most people recognize. And if you're not in the age group that recognizes the music, I suggest one day watch one of the series of the Hawaii Five-0. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jerry Agrusa, who is an associate professor in the School of Travel Industry Management, specializing in hospitality and tourism management. And he has been a faculty member at leading hospitality management programs in the USA for over 25 years. Dr. Agrusa's past positions include the Chair Professor of Hospitality and Tourism Management at the University of North Texas, the Chair Professor at Hawaii Pacific University, and 2 endowed professorships at the University of Louisiana. Dr. Agrusa is well regarded for his expertise in research and teaching in the area of hospitality and tourism management. And in 2017, he was awarded the Napahana Hospitality Educator of the Year from the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association for teaching and inspiring future generations of visitors and leaders. He was also awarded the title of Tourism Expert for the Asia Productivity Organization, an intergovernmental organization whose mission is to contribute to the socio-economic development in the Asia Pacific region. Please welcome Jerry as he presents today's topic, Tourism Strategies for Hawaii Post-COVID-19. Jerry, if you'd like to join us.
Thank you. Aloha, everybody. First, I'd like to thank Alan. That's our school's fight song. And we really appreciate it starting out the show that way. It's amazing when we're at a football game or a basketball game or even a softball game when the band plays that song, the whole crowd goes wild. It's just great. Okay, let me first I'll share my screen here and we'll start the presentation. Okay, aloha everybody. I want to thank again everybody for coming today. I'm Jerry Agrusa. The students at the school call me Dr. A, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about Hawaii as a tourist destination, and then some of the major challenges that we're facing here with the pandemic. As I said earlier, Hawaii is the American island paradise. And here's a little bit about Hawaii. We're actually 8 islands, but only 7 are are inhabited. And a little bit to give you a little bit, Hawaii is the most isolated landmass in the world. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, as you can see. And it's about 5,000 kilometers from Japan. And for the Philippines and Indonesia, it's closer to 7,000. A little bit fun facts about Hawaii. As I mentioned, Hawaii Islands are the most geographically isolated chain on Earth. Hawaii has 10 of the world's 14 climate zones. Another interesting fact that Hawaii has no snakes. And it's the only state in the United States that grows coffee. And this dovetail into what happened last week's presentation, which was on coffee and tea. A little bit about the beginning of tourism in Hawaii. Before 1927, we did have tourism here. We had about 3,000 tourists a year, but most of those tourists came by luxury liner, and they usually took over a month to get here, and they would stay for about 2 months. So the total trip would be 3 to 4 months. So these are folks that were very elite, didn't have to work. Then in 1927, we had the first nonstop flight from the US mainland. But then when we had World War II, a lot of US troops came through here before going out to the Pacific. And that made the United States know about Hawaii. And then in 1959, when Hawaii became the 50th state, the last state in the United States, the first jet aircraft arrived, and that actually started the age of tourism. Some of the products of Hawaii, Hawaii are known for our natural beauty, our beautiful oceans, the clean water, the clean air, and the Hawaii culture, which is we call it the aloha spirit, very giving, very tranquil, and easygoing. One of the things when I first moved here in 1989, there were bumper stickers that used to say, "Slow down, this isn't the mainland." And I moved from Texas to here, and it was amazing how the pace is just so different than the rest of the United States. in a good way. Okay, the economic engine of Hawaii's tourism is Waikiki Beach. It is our most famous known beach. And here's a picture of it outside the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. And as you look in the background, you can see that's Diamond Head. And this is the heartbeat of the tourism economy for the state. And right now, it is one of the hardest hit things in places. Here's what it looked like in 1866. It was actually the summer home of King Kamehameha V. And as you see in the background, there's Diamond Head. And this was his home for summer, his summer home. And this is what it looks like today. All built up with hotels. The closest hotel to the screen is actually the Hilton Hawaiian Village. And then we have the next one you see is Outrigger, and so on down the line to the Sheraton and Hyatt Regency, etc. So Hilton Hawaiian Village is now about 4,500 rooms with timeshare and hotel, and it's our largest single property here in Hawaii. This is what Waikiki looked like during World War II. They had barbed wire, etc. on the beach. And this is what it looks like now. Very developed. It is actually an island. Waikiki is actually an island. It's surrounded by water. They drained out the water at the turn of the century. And now we have the Alawai Canal, and it's surrounded by water. This is what post-COVID Waikiki looked like. Last year, we had 10 million tourists visit Hawaii. And as you see, it's very difficult to even find a little place on the beach to put your towel. And a lot of folks think we had actually too many tourists. Here's some of our tourist destinations. Our #1 tourist destination is Pearl Harbor. More tourists go to Pearl Harbor than any other place. This is Iolani Palace. This is the only palace on the United States soil. In all the states, the only place that has a palace is Iolani Palace. This is the palace of the Queen when the United States actually took over and overthrew the government and took over the state of Hawaii and made it from an independent nation to a territory, and then in 1959 made it part of the United States. Hanauma Bay, this is actually a naturalist environmental location. This place was overrun by tourists in the 80s and early 90s. And then the state stepped in and actually limited the number of tourists that can come. And one of the things that they did well is that you have to watch a video on sustainability. And tourists pay a small fee, about $7.50. And local folks go for free. And they limit the number of people by limiting the number of parking places in the parking lot. And at one time, we were having over 10,000 people a day visiting this location. And it was just overwhelmed. It was very bad for it. Now, it has been closed since March. And it's rejuvenated, and I can't wait till they open it to go back and visit. This is another big tourist location. It's called Manoa Falls. It's actually the beginning of the trail to get here is about 250 yards from my apartment. So I live up here in Manoa, and the trail to start to go see Manoa Falls is here. And we see lots of tourists, and you hear about tourists sometimes getting lost or not finding their way home or slipping. Some folks go out hiking without the proper equipment. Okay, a little bit about the tourists coming here. There was a study that was just completed by the University of Hawaii Office of Economic Research, or HERO. And one of the things they found was that in 1989, the number of tourists that we had were about 6,500,000. And the amount of tourists that we had last year, which was over 10 million, the amount of expenditures that were made was actually equal. So even though, and the benefit for the local population is actually the same when we had 6,500,000 in 1989 versus 10 million in 2019. So like I said earlier, it was our record year. We have about 1,000,000, they say 300,000 residents, though a lot of residents don't live here all year long. And we had 10,424,995 Hawaii visitors last year, according to Hawaii Tourism Authority. Post-COVID-19, we had somewhere between 30 and 35,000 arrivals a day to less than 1,000 arrivals a day. And out of that 1,000, approximately 55% are returning residents and about 450 to 500 visitors. One of the challenges are that the governor in May placed a 14-day quarantine that required for all incoming passengers, whether you're a tourist or a resident. One of the things about the quarantine is you have to stay in your room or your home. It isn't like you get to stay in the hotel and you get to go swimming in the pool and eating in the restaurants on the hotel grounds. Nope. You're supposed to stay in the room. So if a person comes to Hawaii, the usual vacation from the US mainland is 7.5 days. So that means that they came here to stay in the room for 7.5 days and then go home, never out of the hotel room. So one of the challenges is that folks are not adhering to this requirement. And we've arrested over 180 people for breaking quarantine. One of the things the hotels have done is that they, the entry card to their hotel room, they only allow you to open the room once. So when somebody leaves the room before the quarantine is up, when they get to go back in the room, they can't, the card doesn't work. And then they have to go to the front desk, and then the front desk asks what happened, and they get reported. And actually, Hawaii Police Department will come and arrest them for breaking quarantine. So this is, we need to have this, and it needs actually to be very strong before we get these influx of tourists coming here. Our hospitalization our hospitals are too small. We just can't handle it if we have an outbreak with tourists as well as with the local community. Here's the Marriott Waikiki is on the first floor. And what happened is the majority of the hotels are shut. Outrigger, I know Outrigger Reef and Outrigger on the beach are open, but majority of all the hotels in Waikiki are shut. And what here the Marriott had done is they boarded up all the first floor, and these are all the shops. One of the things they did was hire a painter, and they painted the different leis. Now, lei is a flower, or we have some nut leis, and it's a sign of welcome when visitors come here. And what they did was they paid artists to come, local artists, to paint all of the wooden boards around the Marriott. So it looks pretty, and it shows all the different types of leis that are made. This is across the street from the Marriott. This is the Aston Waikiki Beach Hotel. And this is a special interest to me because on the second floor is a restaurant called Tiki's Bar and Grill. And two of the three owners were former students of mine, and Michael Miller and Kelly McGill. And they both were students of mine, and they are both very, very close friends of mine, and they're nice enough to always come and give guest lectures and be judges in my classes. The sad part is that this restaurant has been closed since March, and I'm not sure, what's going to happen. If you could look on the bottom, the hotel's all boarded up, and when people can't get to the restaurant if the hotel is closed. So this is a very successful restaurant for more than a decade, and a decade and a half, and now, like most things in Waikiki, they're closed. Hawaii went from the lowest unemployment in the United States to the highest unemployment rate. And Hawaii tourism industry is devastated by the coronavirus with so many jobs lost. Our unemployment office, there were 240,000 unemployment claims filed. And we have about 650,000 people working in Hawaii. So it's 1 out of 3 people are unemployed due to the coronavirus. And it happened very quick. It happened March 1st, my class, I teach the strategic management capstone class. All my students had jobs, and all my students had jobs when they were graduating at the end in May. Management training jobs, Voyager job with the Marriott Hotel, with the Sheraton, etc. And then by March 17th, in 17 days, everybody lost their jobs. Everybody lost their, they were furloughed from their positions and then furloughed for their management training in May. It's just, the correct word is devastated. So now, then and now, if we look here on the left, we had 10 million tourists in 2019. We had a lot of unhappy residents, though, with the 10 million tourists. All the beach parks, parking lots were full. All the trails were full of tourists, and the local people couldn't enjoy part of that. And then it went from that to Hawaii's tourism getting shut down. Job loss percentage, as I said earlier, is the highest in the country. And when we think, we always think of just hotels, but hotels, restaurants, airlines, we were having, 30,000 to 35,000 people fly in a day, to where we had 9 flights a day. We went from over 100 flights a day to less than 9 flights a day. So all the folks that work for the airlines, all the entities that help the airlines, the folks that transfer the baggage, the fishermen that sold all the fish to the hotels, to the restaurants that catered to all these tourists. They're everything stopped. But one of the good things, Hawaii has the lowest coronavirus infection rate in the whole United States. We flattened the curve. As of yesterday, we had a little over 1,200 cases, not for the day, since the coronavirus started. We are 1/10 of what Florida had in one day. We had 1/10 for the whole 4 months. So just think about that. Florida has somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people testing positive for coronavirus every day. And we only have 1,200, the high 1,200s for the whole time. So we have the lowest amount of folks that are passing. With this tourism furlough, Hawaii's natural attractions are getting a much needed rest. Much more whales are available, you could see, especially on Maui during in late March and late in April. Hanauma Bay, the conditions improved. One of my friends is a surfer, and she was down in Waikiki and a month ago, and she's sitting there waiting on the board, and then a flying fish jumped right up on her surfboard. She was born and raised here. She's been surfing here for 30 years, and she never had that happen. So because there's so many less folks, nature is actually coming back. We did a study. We surveyed 1,000 potential visitors to Hawaii from the US mainland. And one of the results of our study was the majority, 63% of the respondents, agreed that if they would take a COVID-19 test prior to traveling to Hawaii. And then another question we asked, would you take a COVID test after arriving? 61% agreed. So we are hoping that we can get folks to take a COVID test before coming, and if it tests negative, then they don't have to stay for the 14-day quarantine. One of the challenges is now, because of the outbreak of COVID in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and California, they're running out of COVID testing kits. So we're in a little bit of a dilemma right now. Here's a quick little news video from last week or a week ago.
Back to the tourism industry. Grace is live in Kahala after speaking with some of the leading experts on what it's going to take to build the industry back up. Grace?
Yeah, Steve, we know bringing back tourism is not going to be easy because there are so many challenges. I mean, you've been talking about testing and contact tracing to the morning. We know the state is working on that and has been for months now. But that's really just part of it. You know, the other big issue is that we cannot pack in planes anymore with people because of social distancing requirements. Now, we spoke with Jerry Agrusa from the UH School of Travel Industry Management, and he regularly surveys potential visitors, and he found that the ones he surveyed would be willing to shell out more money in order to feel safe while flying.
Part of our study, we asked, would you be willing to still fly if they reconfigure the airplanes to business and first class seats only and were willing to pay a higher price? The majority of the folks that answered the survey said yes.
Now, this is really good news, and that we want visitors who are willing to pay a premium to be in Hawaii. That, according to Agrusa, and because we haven't had the 30,000 visitors flying in per day, Agrusa says that the overall product, that is Hawaii, it has really improved. We've got cleaner air and water, the coral reefs are coming back. And another selling point, if we can make it safe to fly, Agrusa says visitors around the globe will choose Hawaii because they feel safe from the coronavirus because our numbers have been so low. Now, while this has been unprecedented, Agrusa also points out that right now, this is not like we had a hurricane or a tsunami. There's no property damage. We haven't lost sewer or water services or electricity. Really, we're still ready to go. The product, as he says, is even better. So when tourists are ready and when we can figure out the flying and the testing, we're good to go. Steve.
All right. Good to hear. All right, thanks, Grace. 8:06 right now. Lacey is back to the tourism industry.
You know, and as that newscast stated, you know, because we're a long-haul destination, the only way for tourists to arrive here is by airplane. We do have, out of the 10,400,000 plus tourists that came last year, somewhere around 100,000 people got off a cruise ship and stayed. The rest, everybody comes by plane. Nobody comes to Hawaii by boat. Can't come by car, so they only come by airplane. And because folks are afraid right now, one of the reasons I think is that the airlines haven't gotten the message out. Some airlines are using separation every other seat, and some airlines aren't. I know that Hawaiian and Southwest Airlines had said that they were going to keep the middle seat open, but most other airlines, the big carriers that we have in the United States, United and American Airlines, they said they're not doing that on every flight. And because of that, people are afraid. We have to have social distancing in the classroom. We have to have social distancing when we go into a supermarket. Why would there not be that same for an airplane? So what might happen is the government of Hawaii might assist some of these airlines with incentives for reconfiguring the airline seats so the visitors feel safe enough to fly, and then they'll come back to Hawaii. I mean, as we heard from both the newscaster, as well as we read in many research reports, Hawaii is still, the product is still, it's better than it was before. The challenge is, how do we get the tourists to come here? Mr. Frank Haas, who's actually my mentor, he had a great quote. He said, Hawaii's tourism industry should focus on the micro markets and not concentrate only on arrival numbers. But he said that we should be focused on a smaller volume of high spending tourists and improve some of the tourist experience. And I agree with him. We should be looking at more niche markets, and we need to have the tourist that spends higher spending. And we can do that. One of the things that we had in 2019, there were some times when our average daily rate for our hotel rooms were higher than any other major city in the United States. And, you know, some places like New York or Chicago, most people are business travelers. That means their companies are paying. And people don't care when their company pays for the hotel room in comparison to those that are leisure travel. So our average daily rates were very high, and there were record profits for the hotels and the resorts. The challenge is that we were getting some of the market that was coming in. We're not staying in hotels. They were staying in our illegal Airbnbs, etc. And with that, one of the studies that we completed, we found that a person who stays 7 days in Hawaii in a hotel eats out 21 times. A person that stays 7 days in an Airbnb in Hawaii eats out only 7 times. We want tourists that help produce jobs. So people that stay in hotels, we have room service, we have a valet, we have a bellman, we have a front desk. In our illegal short-term vacation rentals or illegal Airbnbs, sometimes people don't even see one person. They only have a person that comes in. So we need to get more of the high-spending tourists. And the tourist needs to be a contributor to the economy and the quality of life of the local residents. What can Hawaii residents do now that we have this pandemic and this shutdown? Some suggestions. Buy local. You know, we want the local residents to go to the farmer's market. And is there a locally based business selling or doing what you can buy from, that you usually buy from other companies, such as go to a local coffee shop instead of some of the big chains. And also try to hire local. How can we help our local people become more hireable, more competitive? And I hope that, you know, with this slowdown now, and we're not sure when the tourists will come back and in what numbers, hopefully some folks that will be able to go back to school, get it to finish their degree, those that have not finished it. And those that have not started, let's get them on a path. Okay, and then also we have a thing called staying local. You know, I had my friend downstairs, Todd, he flew tonight to Maui with his wife and his son, and they're gonna spend a week in Maui and the Big Island. So they're all traveling short, but we're staying here in Hawaii, and we have a thing called a Kamahina rate. And it's a lower price for those that are local residents. And I highly recommend that Hawaii residents to take these out. I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm here for if anyone has any questions. As we say in Hawaii, mahalo nui loa. Thank you very much. And I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you, folks. Aloha.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jerry. What a very interesting presentation with a whole bundle of points and comments that you make that make good talking points. So thanks, Dr. Andy. Thanks, Professor Perry Hobson, for joining us. Why don't you start us off, Perry, with some of the comments from Jerry's presentation?
Well, look, thanks so much, Jerry, for sharing that, because I think putting both the context of Hawaii in a historical perspective about its development and the challenges the destination is now facing. And as we've heard from other destinations, that we're so concerned 12 months ago about over-tourism to now gone to under-tourism, I guess we've got to call it, where suddenly things have just, you know, stopped quite dramatically. And this is really a challenging time for that. So look, we've got a few questions that have come in, and I'm going to throw one of you that's coming on the Q&A, because one of them obviously is a little bit local for you, but he said, the top 4 mayoral candidates have stated that Hawaii has too many visitors. So how are we going to make up the revenue deficit should they succeed in reducing visitors?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think we need to focus on a niche markets and focus on high spending tourists. Now, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we got to be able to make people feel safe to get here. Now, once they're here, if we can get a COVID test, like I said, we asked visitors. This study was done in early June, and we shared it with I shared it with both the local tourism folks as well as with the local government. And then the governor came up with this plan that says that when we open up for tourism, for folks that come and take a COVID test and then bring a negative COVID test within 72 hours before arrival, they will be, the 14-day quarantine will be waived.
Right.
That's great. And people, you know, right now, the devastation that's going on, the outbreaks that are in California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Florida, it's insane. It's insane. I had a friend that just went to a hospital, and luckily their daughter had an asthmatic attack and had to get a needle. And they said that if they had to put her in the hospital, if that epinephrine didn't work, they didn't have a room for her because all the rooms are by COVID.
Yeah.
So people want to get away from where the COVID is. And here,
yeah, well, and that's what we're seeing in so many places, and other destinations are obviously being challenged. And you know, more locally here in Asia, Thailand tried to open up things about a week or so ago, and again has been challenged because again they were looking at trying to do COVID tests for people to come in, but there still seems to be a lot of issues on how long the COVID tests take, whether they're very accurate, and so I can see there's still a lot of problems that we're facing globally to get that testing to a point where it actually helps the tourism industry.
Well, I think that, you know, we'd look at places that it's worked. In Japan, Korea, their testing worked very well. And then we need to find out what they're doing and just copy them. Ask them. Buy the machines. We have a military hospital here, Tripla. They showed that they have a machine that can do 5,000 COVID tests a day. But I have a nephew that lives in Florida. He's waited already 12 days for the COVID test. One of his employees who tested positive, everybody had to go get tested. They're waiting. It's 12 days already. They haven't heard. It's not fantastic. Right.
Yeah. Let's leave that one there for a moment, guys. That's fantastic. It looks like Dr. Andy's got right into the spirit of things with his wonderful Hawaiian shirt there, Andy. Have you got any comments to add to the conversation?
Actually, you know, Tina Aquino asked a question that I agree with is, you know, you mentioned that right now there's 1,000 people returning every day and half of them are residents. What's the profile of the other 500 people? Are they premium tourists that are coming to take advantage of the quiet beaches? Or are they people trying to escape from the United States and hide on the island to get away from the COVID? Well, what are the people that are coming now? What are they doing?
Well, I don't know the true profile. We did have a newscast yesterday. One of the things that when there are people who violate the quarantine, it's actually the Attorney General's office that are prosecuting them. And one of the gentlemen, Mr. Raposa, he works for, I think, the Attorney General on the Big Island. He was saying how that there's so many people that are violating it. But you know what's happening is they're actually calling the hotel, checking, but there's some folks stay in vacation rentals. So by doing that, it's more difficult to keep up. And I personally, I don't believe that anybody comes here for 7 days is going to stay in a hotel room for all 7 days and then fly back home. Not with this, look at the picture. This is what it looks like. It's just like putting a kid in a candy store and tell him he can't pick any candy.
You know, we've heard numbers about maybe reducing tourists, but what are the residents saying that they want? Are the residents happy now that there's no business, the numbers are down, or are they? Where's the happy medium between the high mass tourism and the premium tourism?
Right, there hasn't been it now. The balance is totally now backwards. We have so many unemployed. We have so many businesses. I'm on the Restaurant Association Advisory Board, and there's just so many local restaurants that are just closing, that will never open again. They're just not, they can't do it. They can't do it. The rents here are so high. And it's so sad because they're not restaurants that opened a week ago. Some of them have been around 5, 10, 15 years. And you know, I wish that we could somehow check the tourists before they get here. Now, if the governor came up with another idea for a while, looking at bubble tourism. I think Alan's was thinking that with New Zealand, where New Zealand and Australia were able to go back and forth. He mentioned that we do that with maybe parts of Korea and parts of Japan. But then now it just didn't happen yet. And I think that would be we have 1.5, 1.6 million Japanese a year come here. The Japanese are always very safety conscious. They're great tourists. They spend money. You know, the only problem you never hear of riots. The only riots are if there's a sale at Louis Vuitton store or something like that, because they're shopping. They're big shoppers. And, you know, we need that. We need that GET tax. We need that. And you know, they've been coming here for 50 years. You know, they were by far our #1 international tourist. And when I first moved here in 1989, 1 out of every 3 tourists was Japanese. You know, we had 2.2.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry, this is an interesting situation because most countries are looking to develop domestic tourism and to replace international. But in the case of Hawaii, because the infection rate in the mainland US is so high, actually you need to be looking at international destinations, whereas most other countries are closing their borders internationally. So it's quite an interesting, but quite a very different situation that Hawaii is faced with.
And because we're out in the middle of the ocean, we're on a rock in the middle of the biggest ocean in the world, in the Pacific. We're safer, but it's just so much more challenging to get here. I could never, ever have thought that this could happen, ever. But like we've said throughout the presentation, the product, man, if you go to Waikiki without the 75,000 tourists that are usually in Waikiki, it's so different.
Of course.
We've been speaking a fair bit about tourism today, guys. I know quite a number of our students joining us today are studying hospitality. Something that you said in your presentation, Jerry, was quite interesting to me. The fact that the hotel now playing the role of policing. I mean, the concept of allowing a one entry into the room and then penalising the guest. I wonder what the guests' longer term views about brand loyalty might be. If, you know, hotels reporting them and they getting caught and then thinking, well, I'm not staying there anymore, you know, as a matter of point.
Okay. One of the questions that we asked of those 1,000 folks on the mainland, what do you feel? Now, you get arrested here. It's not a ticket. You get arrested. You have to go to the police station, fingerprinted, picture with a number, maybe handcuffed. These are not good things. And you have to then go to court. You can get fined up to $5,000 or 1 year in jail. So when we asked the question, what do you feel about this? Folks felt more strongly against the 1 year in jail. Jail's not a good thing. So they felt that that wasn't right. But the fine, the majority of the folks answered neutral, but out of the ones that yet agreed or disagreed, more agreed that the fine is worthy to keep Hawaii safe. If we had any type of big outbreak here, the medical facilities cannot handle it. We don't have the medical facilities to handle it. And that outbreak will not just be with the tourists, it'll be with the residents. Now we have some hotels that are opened, that are working. I know Outrigger Reef, I watched a thing on the news. They have a special wand, a desanitizer wand, and they're going through lots of protocol. I think that we need to get that in line. When we just opened up a few weeks ago to fly inter-island, like if I wanted to go to Maui in May, if I got on a plane to go to Maui, I would have to stay in a hotel for 14 days quarantine before going out to the beach in Maui. Yep. So
yeah, but don't you think, Jerry, the problem here is that we've gone from the hospitality industry to making hotels like prison camps. They were never designed this way. And I think it's a fundamental problem that the hotel industry has been thrust into becoming quasi jails. And you've seen this problem in Australia, where again, the hotel industry has been literally hijacked because of a public health issue. And now we've been made jailers. And that was never the intention of the hotel industry. It's a fundamental problem, I think, for the hotel industry suddenly to have been thrust into this. And I think governments around the world, Australia, the US, have got to recognize that that was never how this industry was set up. Putting anybody in solitary confinement for 2 weeks is a really big issue. There are human rights issues here at stake, and no one wants to seem to address those. Now, of course, we've got public health issues, but it seems to me that whether it's Hawaii or Australia and other countries have got a fundamental mistake of how they've approached this. So we've gone, you know, people understand hospitals, we understand hospitality. We were never designed to run prison camps. And that's really what we've ended up being thrust into doing. And I think that the governments have got to step back. And whilst having quarantine may be a big necessity in the situation, how we've designed those, just throwing people in a room, locking the door and chucking away the key for 2 weeks, of course we're going to have huge mental health issues, all those other sorts of issues. I think this is a really big problem that we've got ourselves into here.
I did hear one suggestion when one of the governor panels I don't know if it was from the governor's office or somebody else. They said that they might try to do a place where you would have a all-inclusive resort and people,
Exactly.
tourists go there. The challenge with that is the employees. Now, we'll see what happens. The National Basketball Association, NBA, has now taken over part of Disney World. And they have a quarantined area where the basketball players stay. And they'll start playing on Friday. And they've been there for 2 weeks. And today, all the players were tested. 0 COVID.
No.
That's a great number, 0. We had 20 yesterday here in Hawaii. We need to go back down to 0. We need to be at 0. We need to be at 0 before we let all the tourists in. But like you said, what is happening with those 500 tourists that are coming a day? I don't believe that they're all staying in their rooms. I spoke to some of my other friends that are experts in both hotel and law enforcement. They don't believe it for a minute. So what happens is they come to Hotel A, and then they're willing to book a room somewhere else, and then they go out, and then they disappear into the woodwork or into the beach. We don't know where they are. But there was one local resident, this young lady. She picked up her boyfriend, and he came in from Korea. And guess what? They arrested her too. She was arrested for the same of something in abetting, the same as if when you rob a TV store and I drive to. Yeah. I was like, really? And they said, yup, it's like a felony. It's real.
Jerry,
the boy.
Last question, Jerry. How long do you think it's going to take before things get even halfway normal?
Well, I think if we can get this quarantine testing down, I think we'll be at half. I think that half of the employees will be back by Christmas. Once we get the vaccine, we'll be set.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be set. We'll be the place people want to come. We'll be set. As soon as the quarantine, if they have a vaccine, and even if it costs money, the people who will pay the money for the vaccine, they're going to come to Hawaii. This is the place to go.
Listen, guys, I think what a wonderful conversation, and some
Absolutely.
very, very interesting points here right across. Thank you very much, Dr. Jerry Agrusa, our guest presenter today. A very, very interesting conversation. Thank you very much, Professor Perry Hobson, of course, Dr. Andy. Good questions, great comments, and I think it's not dissimilar to many of the other destinations. You face similar challenges, as Perry has been pointing out, as Andy knows, to most other destinations. You're probably a little bit like Australia in one respect, that you're an island, a much smaller island than us, granted, a significant number of tourists going there. I must applaud you for some of the work and some of the research that you've been doing already, and in terms of some of the thoughts that you've had about people taking tests before they come and so on. So great work in that space. Ladies and gentlemen, and faculty and students, please give me a virtual round of applause for our presenter today. Thank you very much, Jerry. A very, very interesting presentation. And if you don't mind, everybody, hang around, Jerry, because we're just going to run through the rest of the show. Thank everybody, and we'll end up today's presentation. So let me just go back to this, if you don't mind.
I'll stop share.
Yep.
Thank you. And we're back there, everybody. So once again, Perry, would you just like to run through and thank our academic partners for today?
Absolutely, and let me start off by thanking Jerry and the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the School of Travel Industry Management, particularly for joining and also becoming our latest academic partner, to LPU in the Philippines and to UST, also to our friends and the Macau Hospitality and Tourism Educators, to NCUT in Taiwan, of course to HELI, the Higher Education Leadership Institute in Australia, and of course to my colleagues at Sunway University. Thank you for being supporters of 30-Minute Talks.
Thank you very much, Perry. And as with always, everybody, we've got another fantastic show lined up for you next week. Dr. Andy, given that you're presenting next week's show, just talk us through what you're going to be doing next week.
Yeah, one of the topics that I wanted to share with our attendees is about the complexity of choice. And this is something that is going to affect even Hawaii and every destination. When people are traveling in the past, there were so many opportunities, different places to go, hotels, Airbnb, do you go by RV, do you fly, do you take a boat? All those decisions are a challenge. And that decision-making process was very well defined in Barry Schwartz's 2005 very popular TED Talk. And so I've taken that and I've massaged it a little bit, and we're going to talk, and this will help students understand that when you are even trying to decide what courses to take, when there's so many different courses, when there's so many different things on the menu, when there's so many decisions to make, that it's a stressful process. And understanding that process can help you make better decisions. And if the destinations understand how they're going to have to reduce that choice, they can increase guest satisfaction and profits by making the choices simpler. So it's an interesting discussion. I hope we'll see everybody next week. Tell your friends.
Look forward to
Absolutely.
it very much, Randy.
Really, really look forward to it. Andy, thank you very much for preparing the presentation. And yes, I think I join with Perry in saying, and all of our guests, that we look forward to that show. I just want to also thank all of our students, all of our participants, all our registrants, faculty that have joined us for today. There's a very large number of questions that have come through for Jerry when he was talking. Thank you for your questions. Like always, we couldn't get around to all of them, but we hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. Don't forget also that for those students that are looking for a certificate for their attendance today, please scan the QR code now, complete the survey, answer the questions. That'll help us with our program, help us improve the program, and also give you an opportunity to get your name down for qualifying for one of the certificates. And on that note, everybody, if I can say thank you from myself for joining us today. Perry and Andy, if you'd like to thank everybody, and I'll ask Jerry to say goodbye.
And again, I have posted the link for the survey in the chat, so please use the link or the QR code. And thank you, Jerry, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining 30-Minute Talks this week. This is our 15th program, and we're going to be continuing some exciting programs, especially next week on the complexity of choice.
And I'm looking forward to that very much. So again, thank you for joining us. From me at Sunway University, thanks again for participating and being part of our show. And again, a big thank you to Jerry joining us from Hawaii, where I think it's pretty late in the evening.
I want to first I thank everybody for joining us, especially here in Hawaii. It's about 9 o'clock. I appreciate your time. I thank Alan, Perry, and Andy for inviting me. And mahalo nui loa. Thank you all. Be safe out there. Stay safe from the virus. We're going to beat it. We're going to beat it. Aloha.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you to the University of Hawaii as well. And once again, everybody, see you next week for a very interesting program. Thank you for joining us today.